When we went on vacation in South Texas this past summer, and I know that you all went, Regina, as well, to the Alamo. Did y'all go to the Alamo? Yeah, we went to the Alamo on a Sunday morning. Okay? Now, I know you're saying to yourself, well, why weren't you in church on Sunday morning instead of at the Alamo? I have an out for that. Guess what the last building standing at the Alamo is? It's the church. So I was in church on Sunday morning on my vacation. But as we were waiting outside the Alamo to go in, because there's a big line out there sometimes, there was this man on the courtyard in front of the Alamo. And he was yelling from the top of his voice and preaching to those outside there. Now, I'm sure that some non-religious people kind of found this offensive and intrusive. I, however, don't think I'd have the guts to actually stand out there in the middle of a bunch of people I don't know and try to preach the gospel. I have a picture of it. You won't be able to see it on camera, but I'll pass this around. You all can see. This is the guy that was standing outside preaching while we were standing in line at the Alamo. And you can just kind of pass that around and share. This guy was standing out there all by himself, just preaching. And then he would even break out in a chorus of "I'll fly away," you know. He had some guts, I got to tell you. I'm sure he was a preacher of some kind at some church, or retired. He was an older gentleman. But he was very loud with his faith. Very loud with his faith. And he would share the gospel with those who would hear his voice, and even those who didn't really want to hear his voice. Again, it would take a big faith to stand out there and preach the gospel to people you don't know. But that's not the way most of us do that, is it? To go out and stand and preach to people we don't know, stand out in the middle of nowhere. That's not the way we do it. It's a way it's been done, but it's not the way it happens most of the time. Most people prefer us to do really in a more quiet setting, maybe a one-on-one basis. In fact, sometimes it's even hard for us to share our faith, isn't it? It's kind of hard for us to share our faith story because we kind of think, you know, do they really want to hear this? I mean, that was kind of one of the things when I just became and rededicated my life to Christ. I thought, does anybody really want to hear my faith story? I mean, I just don't know. I just don't know if they do or not. I would live in fear of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time as well. How many have that fear? You know, you share your faith and you think, oh, I'm going to say something that's going to be totally wrong. It's going to really turn this person off. I have learned, though, as I've stood here before you many times, that yes, I said a few wrong things. I said a lot of right things, but you know, I know that when you're sharing a faith story, when you're sharing how God has worked in your life, He has a way of putting those words in your mouth. I could have the best sermon written up here, and somehow God has a way of changing and twisting what I say to what He wants me to say. He has a way of doing that. Another reason we might not want to feel comfortable sharing our faith story is we really don't think that people care to hear our faith story. You know, I lived with the notion for a long time, and I was guilty of this as well, and says, oh no, another one of those type of people. And when somebody tried to share their story, you know, my ears have become closed. When I was a kid in high school, it was really kind of funny. We were at a football game one night. And you know how high school kids are. You know, it's just like they're real smart. You know, they think they know everything. And, you know, talking about saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. At the football game, back when prayer was allowed at a football game, prayer went on. I said we were in a visiting town. I don't remember where it was, but the prayer went on forever. I mean, it was at least a 3 to 4 minute prayer. And And I popped off and I said something like, okay, let's pass the collection plate now. And this was me in high school now, okay? Little did I know the Lutheran pastor was standing in front of me. And he turns around and looks at me and says, what do you mean by that? I became real scared about sharing my faith story for a long time. But I'll tell you, it's something that's important that we need to share. It's something we need to share. And our scripture this morning talks about somebody who is very loud with his faith. Very loud. I want to reread the scripture this morning. And I want you to think about this in two ways. From the blind man who spoke and Jesus' reaction. Okay? Then they came to Jericho as Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city. A blind man, Bartimaeus, that is the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard him, it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me, yelling from the top of his voice. And many of them who were there rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But that didn't stop him. He shouted all the more. He said, Son of David, have mercy on me. And at that moment, Jesus stopped and said, call him. So they called to the blind man and said, cheer up, on your feet, he's actually calling you. And throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. And Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? And the blind man says, I just want to see. I want to see. And Jesus said, go. Your faith has healed you. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. He received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Two things here. First off, Bartimaeus was being very vocal about what he wanted. He was screaming at the top of his voice. He knew what he wanted, and he knew that Jesus could provide it. I mean, when we want something, when you're in Walmart and your kids are there, and they want something, what do?
Scream and cry.
They scream and cry until they know what they want. They know what they want. They scream and cry. And how many of us give in? Oh, come on now. Some of us give in. Now, I'm fortunate. My daughter didn't do that. Of course, we never took her down to 12 either. But no. But when you want something, you scream for it. You want something so passionately, you want it so bad, you scream for it. And that's what Bartimaeus did.